morning and welcome everyone to Friday Cafe, our bonus edition for the end of this school year. We're really excited to have you here and to share with you some very important new information with some fabulous conversation catalysts today. So I'm Judy Carson with the State Department of Education. And I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Betsy Laborious, who's at CRAC and directs the Connecticut Family School Partnership Project. So a few updates I wanted to bring to you. A lot's happening, and I want to be sure our Friday Cafe community knows about these things. First, the Office of Early Childhood has established a parent cabinet, and they're taking applications for positions on that cabinet. And what I'll do in just a minute is I'll put all these links in the chat, so you can just click on it and you'll have these at hand. Also, the Parent Trust Fund request for applications is out. That's funding for parent leadership programs. And I'll be having a bidders conference next week. And if you go to that link, you can download all the information about the grant and also how to sign up for the bidders conference. So with all of the federal funding that I know you're seeing come into your districts and communities, a lot of new initiatives are taking place. There's a couple of really good ways to stay on top of what's happening. There's 2 newsletters you can sign up for. One is called Educate CT, that comes out from the Department of Education about monthly, and just chock full of really good things. To stay up to date on things that are happening even more quickly, there's something called the Superintendent's Digest. Those are posted on the State Department of Education website. Those are memos that go out to every superintendent twice a week. And so that's really where the breaking news is. And that's not, you don't sign up for notices there, you'll just have to check that website, but you'll see when something new is posted. So I highly recommend those things so you can stay in the know and also pass on opportunities to your colleagues and families. Next slide, please. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host and partner in this Friday Cafe experience to let you know what's going to happen next and introduce our wonderful guests. Betsy.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Dr. Carson. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone here. Our agenda is pretty straightforward, but what I would like to do right now is I'd like to introduce Kim Traverso. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Kim. Kim is a consultant, or sometimes we call them program managers for the State Department of Education. She has been a tireless advocate for social, emotional programming and really taking care of young people, particularly at this juncture. And what we're hearing over and over again from all of the conversations that we're having with not only schools, but with families, is that there is a concern about the social, emotional well-being of our young people. You know, what happens across the board with young people as they're in school, as they're moving back into school, and what's going to happen in September. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kim. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. And it's so exciting to be here at the famous Friday Cafe. I'm just so excited, Judy and Betsy. So thank you, first of all, for having us. Before we get started with the wonderful presentation from Aperture, I really want to just sort of give you some context about social emotional learning, or sometimes called SEL. The Connecticut State Department of Education, this isn't new work. I just want to really make that clear that we've been doing this work for years. But, you know, because of these pandemics, and there's more than one pandemic that's going on currently right now, you know, we really have to put SEL into the forefront. And so one of the things I just want to say is that I love the family engagement goals and values, because this really aligns to our SEL work. I love the terms strength-based, which when we talk about the Devereaux today, you're going to understand that it is just strength-based and really looking at strengths and not deficits. You use the word equity, restorative, connection, and then expanding our thinking. That is SEL in a nutshell. And I would add in the big thing for me regarding that is the connections. SEL is about building those relationships. It's about understanding self and understanding others. And this is why we are pushing this work into the forefront of what we're doing. So I want to start off by telling you that last year in the fall of 2020, we just did a statewide landscape survey with all the districts. And I'm happy to say that we had a return rate of 62% respondents. And in this survey, it was really about the systems approach around SEL. So when I say systems, I'm really talking about things like, do you have policies? Do you have goals that are aligned to those policies? Do you have curricula that is SEL related? So things like that. Are your evaluations aligned to SLOs, which are student learning objectives? And also, how are we embedding that process into our instruction? So that was many of the questions. And so what we got from just the snapshot is really two big things. And one big idea was that a universal level of, you know how we screen for math or we screen for ELA, and we have to, like, the kids come into our classroom and we're like, hey, where are you on that continuum for math or for English or for reading? This is the same thing for social emotional learning. We actually are just doing a quick analysis or a quick screening to see exactly where students are. And guess what? The districts are asking for this. They're asking so that they can actually understand where their kids are coming in, but also not to find deficits, but really to boost the strengths and highlight those strengths. Because I think sometimes we forget the importance of the growth process around SEL development. And lastly, the only other thing that I want to add before I turn it over or turn it back to Betsy is that we did prioritize social emotional learning at the State Department of Education. But I want to also think about some things, because you're going to have students who are going to come back into our school districts who have loss, who have sickness, who have challenges in their household, who have food insecurities, who may be homeless. And so we are trying to make sure that our staff and schools are ready and able to recognize these concerns. So, you know, they're already doing some great work like check-ins regularly. They're doing what I call great brain breaks so that students get a chance to like just chill out a little bit before they have to continue on with all their work. We're also looking at, you know, making sure that we bring out those classroom norms and expectations and continue with our routines. We also want to make sure that, and I know that Lisa Ann Williams will talk about this today, is two-way communications with families. And when I say two-way communication, I'm talking about reciprocity. So I'm talking about where families are part of the decision making. So they're sitting at the table. And that's really important because this will help, the DESA or the Devereaux will help with making those decisions around SEL. And lastly, you know, I just want to say thank you all for all the things that you've done. This has been an unprecedented year and a half. And I just really want to say thank you. And also all of us coming together, and just, I think Connecticut has done an incredible job, and let's just keep up the great work. And I'll turn it over to Betsy. Thank you.
Kim, thank you so much. And thank you for that whole alignment with family engagement. You know, I think that's really why this is why we're not only looking at SEL, but that whole important piece of families knowing what's going on and having that, you know, having that support from families, incredibly important. And so, you know, just honing in on the strength-based and the looking for, you know, looking for ways to work together and meeting parents where they are and having that, you know, that total ongoing kind of communication, you know, that is where we stand. That is the foundation of our work. And so this is in the right place. It absolutely is in the right place. I would like to now, this is, the major part of what we're doing this morning. So I would definitely like to introduce Lisa Ann Williams, who is a senior partner and master trainer, and Ashley Kurth, also from Aperture Education. And they're really going to talk about, again, not only the social emotional piece of what can happen, but Kim referred to that universal screen, kind of a check-in. Where are young people? And just kind of taking the temperature. So again, I know they have important information that you're all going to be very interested in. So I think I'm turning it over next to Lisa Ann Williams. Is that correct?
That's right, Betsy. I will take it from here for a little while. So glad to be here today. I was very excited to be able to join today. Not only do I love how interactive and still centered around relationships and discussion that you all do your work, both with those providers and with parents, but that SEL is those skills that I feel I have, my deepest understanding of what SEL is really very connected to the center of your work. So there are a couple of things I'd like you to do to get ready to participate today. So because SEL is for all, we are going to have you do a couple of activities to really connect to what this is and to help further that understanding as you move off into connecting and discussing with others. And so please go to menti.com, either on your computer browser window or on your phone. And as you're doing that, I did just want to give a little background on our team, because I know Kim got a chance to speak there, but there is somebody who does a lot of behind the scenes work here. And I'd like Ashley just to give herself a little introduction there, because she will be supporting a lot of the districts and staff, and does engage on a lot of different levels, went all the way down from classroom implementation all the way up to district level. So Ashley, if you want to just give yourself a quick intro.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ashley Kurth. I joined the Aperture team about 3 months ago now as the SEL implementation consultant. And I'm based out of the Boston, Mass area, so a neighbor to Connecticut. And while I am fairly new to the team, I have many years of experience working in education-focused companies and organizations. So most recently, I was at City Year, where I worked for 12 years managing the evaluation and data analytics team. And I also have my master's in elementary education, and I never got into the classroom, but I do feel fortunate that through my work, I've had the opportunity to use my skills, experience, and passion for education, as part of the work that I do day in and day out. And of course, I have my own 2 kids, so that keeps me very much involved as well, and probably the most rewarding. So thanks for letting me introduce myself, Lisa Ann. Back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. And so I'm Lisa Ann Williams. I was previously a teacher for about 13 years. I actually graduated from Eastern Connecticut State. So my home ground is there in Connecticut, and that's where I first was able to really support students. But I have worked in Texas and also in South Carolina. So I've had pretty good exposure to lots of different types of support for students and understandings of where SEL is. I mostly worked with students who had special education needs, and my background has been in behavior support and program development. I did go back and get my master's in applied behavior analysis, and connecting that back to both being a teacher and being a parent of 4, I think that that's still some of the things that helps me stay on top of, all the different things that my kids are working on, and also thinking of where they're growing both in school and at home. And so moving forward, I'm really tried to make sure that I keep at the heart of this discussion really parents, and whether we're parents ourselves or we're supporting those who are parents, or whether we're in an adult role of support to students, as Judy said before, it's your tribe. And really having that connection to how we are supporting and engaging both in school and out of school, where students are and where their support networks are, is really important. And today we want to make sure that we build that awareness around the benefits for SEL and make connections to some of those SEL frameworks, and also to the Connecticut partnership itself. We're really proud to be partnering with your Connecticut State Department of Education, and we've had an overwhelmingly positive response from districts. As Kim had said, this is something that districts have been asking for. It's also something that districts in your state have been doing. Some of our longest standing partnerships are with districts in Connecticut around the DESA. And it takes a lot of dedicated people to launch an initiative like this. And there are some really amazing folks, and I've been meeting more and more as the weeks go by, and Kim has been introducing me to different teams. And so there really is a large network of teams really supporting the work that is going on. And it is something that you've been leading the way in. You've been leading the way in teaching standards, in equity, in engaging families and community members, and you're doing groundbreaking work in supporting the SEL needs of students. What's really always present is like, what is driving that vision of SEL work from the ground up, and why is SEL so critical? And how are we going to do this? And really, we'll be working together and moving conversation, research, and practice to really impact everybody. And although in more recent years, schools have been integrating and focusing this SEL language into goals and plans, there really has been SEL in a lot of those community organizations, and organizations that really involve parents and families for many years. And so as the different areas of the community and who support students have come together in understanding this research and where the work needs to be done, that's where we're seeing it now show up even more in schools. What's really resonated for me most when connecting both as a parent with SEL and with parents when I was a teacher, of course, is that school success is really a small fragment of the lifelong success that we have as individuals and members of our families and communities. But we do want children to be successful in school so they can be prepared for life. And with that, not only comes that academic content knowledge, but the skills to form relationships and supportive networks, to get through life's ups and downs, to persevere through challenges, and all while continuing to grow, to be successful and happy in whatever life choices they make. So really keeping that in mind. We're going to move forward today, and we're going to do a warm-up activity and really connect with our own understanding and experience with SEL, and then touching on the Aperture approach and foundation, so you have an understanding about what is going to be in place in many schools and where parents may be receiving communication from educators and administrators, and then also thinking about those long-term impacts, because as we said, really school is preparing students for lifelong success. And so what does this look like moving forward? So to get us started, we're going to do our warm-up activity. So I'm going to ask you to do a reflection and think about the people in your life that have made an impact. They can be family members, or they can be adults from other areas of your life. And when thinking about these people, focus in on one person in particular and think about what made them stand out. And then I'm going to give you about 1 to 2 minutes to do that. And so I'm asking you to find and highlight 2 to 3 words that really accurately describe that person. I really love seeing these all pop up, and you can start to see also, I can keep track of some of those words that are coming up multiple times, like supportive, loving, honest. So just have a look there. And I'm one of those learners who needs to write it down to be able to capture it. So I was taking notes here as I saw things popping up, and I found there's a lot of overlaps as well on encouragement, kind, patient, involved. And right now I'm going to do one of those wonderful screen shifts as I jump back in to where this connects. See if I can get it to do it. I did. Okay. So where does this connect with social emotional learning? So I am going to repeat some of those words while you look at this castle framework. So I wanted to just highlight and review the core SEL competencies that you might already be familiar with, and the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, or CASEL, really has established these 5 core social emotional competencies that can be taught and applied in developmental stages from childhood through adulthood and across cultural contexts. And so these 5 competencies serve as a guide for what students should know and be able to do. And it does apply not only across academic areas, but also in civic, career, health and wellness, and overall success. But it's not just about these 5 competencies. It really is going into many layers. But if you look at being honest, being involved, that's taking an active role in learning, being patient, that means giving people time to express their opinions. It also means being able to manage your emotions in times of frustrations, and showing encouragement. That is showing your leadership skills and personal responsibility. So all those things that you just talked about, that you can recall from somebody who impacted you in those relationships in your life, really just about all those words fit in on these CASEL competencies. So again, to take it a little bit deeper, we're going to do another reflection. So this time, instead of we're going to move from somebody that impacted you and looking at what you remember about them to yourself. So now this is a little bit more introspective and is focusing more on your self-awareness and not so much your social awareness and relationship skills. But I want you to think a little bit about your school life and about a time you were challenged. And really our goal here is to think about some skills that we could have really used at that time, but maybe you didn't have. Maybe you learned them later on in life or in other situations, or maybe you didn't quite have that skill so that you could apply it at that time. But if you can stop and think about at that challenging time and identify some of those skills. And you know, the benefit of being older is that we're able to reflect back and really view situations with a different sense of perspective. So hopefully this will help you connect there. Reflect on a challenge you experienced in school and identify skills that you wish you had at that time to overcome it. Oh, I have to say right away, I'm connecting to planning. I really did not learn about planning until college. And I would say it was the second half of college. Yes, asking for help. I think the people who know you the most will often remind you to ask for help before sometimes we'll do that ourselves. And I'm just going to connect a little further with some of these skills you wish you had. And while thinking about that, also get a little deeper into what the DESA is. So some of the things that I heard people say was planning. So that falls into goal-directed behavior, being able to break down tasks and set plans for yourself. And then I noticed someone mentioned being able to function in a space that, and it was specifically a white dominated space, but that could apply to people from many different cultures being in spaces which they hadn't been before. So coming from England myself, I connect with that, because even though you think of America and England as very similar in their maybe in their background, the cultural shock is very real. So being able to be comfortable in new environments is something that we also want children to be able to do, and adults. And then I also So asking for help. So being able to be aware of your emotions and be able to know when you need to ask for help because things are maybe getting a little bit too much. And then also being able to let go of perfectionism. So knowing your strengths and your areas of growth. You know, these are all skills across these competencies, but specifically, I highlighted a little bit in self-awareness there, some of the things that we want children to be able to do and that the DESA looks at. Also in personal responsibility. And I hope you caught my color coding there. So you can see in personal responsibility and decision making, you know, those problem solving skills come in multiple areas, not only in life, but in math and science. And those are some of the areas of overlap there. And then optimistic thinking. And this is something that is a little different in our focus with the DESA, and it comes from our research and background around resilience. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that here, but really that building confidence. And I know that somebody touched on that in the word cloud too. So I hope this helps connect to the 8 areas that the DESA looks at with skills and helps really make it real for what it feels like as you as an adult, but also being able to connect to students. Now, this slide here is really capturing some research done by Castle on social emotional learning, and it combines 2 phases from a meta-analysis. In this article in 2011, it was published really to share the results of this. And a meta-analysis is a technique where you're looking at results from lots of different studies and combining it so that you can look at the broad impact. So this was looking at studies around the impacts of social emotional learning and really combine that so that you can have like a more overall view of these impacts on children. So about 270,000 students were involved, and really across these studies, it was demonstrated that there was a wide array of positive benefits for students as a result of receiving high quality social emotional learning program in school. And you can see that there's improved attitudes about themselves and others, improved SEL skills and classroom behaviors, and also, of course, that academic achievement part, because yes, all students, whether they're already high achieving, can apply that academic content and ability when even more when they have strong SEL skills. So this applies to all students. And then also you can see the decreases in some of those conduct problems, such as classroom misbehavior and aggression, and also decreases in emotional distress. So you can see there is a long-term, a lot of those benefits that directly relate to things that impact a child in school, both in a positive way, but also things that could impact a child in school and cause it to be more challenging. And so that is, again, where we connect with doing this work in partnership with schools and families. Now, I did just want to give you a moment to connect to one of our districts that has been doing this work in Connecticut for quite a long time. And they have been building out their supports around students for about the last 3 years with us, but they've been doing this work, as has your CSDE team for longer than that. And it really is, like we said before, layers of SEL. And then there's a point that comes in where you need to understand, one, is what we're doing working, and how much are we helping students to grow? But also, as Kim mentioned before, being able to, when a child walks in 4 weeks into school, understanding where are they at with their skills. We know that SEL skills can be impacted by trauma, and especially thinking about the context in more recent times, that everybody responds differently to the supports that are put in place. And so some students may need earlier on supports, whereas other students, they might show up later on as needing support. So everyone's growth is different. We just want to know when they need more support and not wait until there's issues happening to provide that. So that is one of the ways in which we have been supporting both in-school and out-of-school organizations and those community-based organizations that provide more intensive services, and really being able to connect the work that's going on in the school with what parents are seeing at home and those supports that parents receive in the community, where everybody's on the same page about what are these skills that this child has that we can help them continue to build, but also where can we look at the additional differentiation and moving forward. And so we've served about 1 million students, which I never thought I would leave the classroom, because I thought, how am I going to make a difference if I'm not actually in there with hands-on? But knowing that you all, I'm supporting you all in the work you're doing is really amazing. So we're continuing to build that strength lens. And as we said before, that's where we really connect with your work. And that's where Aperture is different, is that we look at what strengths does a student have. We look at how do educators connect with students on their strengths. We look at how can we connect with parents who see their child's strengths at home that maybe we don't see in the classroom. So we have a bridge for communication and really being able to tie that all together and work as a team to support these students. Now, I touched on resiliency before, but I just wanted to stop and ask, and you can type in the chat, but have you heard of resiliency theory? Let's see if we have, I'm going to see if I can do the chat at the same time. Yes. See how many people we have here who has heard of resiliency theory. No, okay. Let's see here as I go forward. So as I mentioned before, that's something that's really unique to Aperture and our approach. And it comes from really a model. It is a science-based model. And we're looking at resiliency being the ability to succeed in the face of hardship, or really bounce back. We call it, we're bouncing back. And it does require that, one, you know that a child's been exposed to risk, or an individual, and that you can see successful adaptation. So we can't really say that someone has resiliency until we can see it and then bouncing back. But the other thing that we don't always know as educators is if a student has been exposed to risk, or how much. And that was also something that as an educator, we can't impact, and often parents still can't change that either. We all come into contact with risks, whether it's from our environment, it's from family factors, or it's within our own personal factors. But what we focus on in Aperture are the and I apologize. So we continue to focus on the how can we build protective factors in the environment. So that happens for educators in their classroom. That's how they make their classroom supportive and warm and trusting. But it's also how parents do that at home. So making sure that that we have a great understanding of what the expectations are, so that that's that same transfer of communication and vocabulary, both in school and out of school, can make a really big impact on the environment. When it comes to family, we know that even as adults and educators, we might not have all the SEL skills that we really need to be most effective. So as educators are learning about these SEL skills themselves, they will be able to connect with families through different activities and resources to be able to provide information and opportunities for these families to engage in these activities with their students, with their children at home. And in our breakout session today, we will be actually doing one of the activities from our system. So I'm continuing to build those personal protective factors, and that's where resilience and optimistic thinking really comes in. So I showed you before the castle framework, and here just for you to be able to see where the DESA competencies align, because that is how we really fit comprehensively alongside this SEL work, and also how it aligns up to how the Connecticut State Department of Education is framing out their work as well. So it's very unique to Aperture. There's optimistic thinking and continuing to build these strengths and skills. And as we highlighted before, we're not looking at deficits. We're not looking to label students. We're not looking at negative behaviors. We're looking at what does a child bring to the table. How can we connect with them and give them an opportunity to continue being successful as they learn and build more skills? It is really important for parents to understand that this is also an assessment that was developed with an equity lens, and that when the authors developed these skills and dug into the Castle framework to figure out what kinds of skills could really be measured, that they looked at, well, which ones might not be able to be measured in all cultures, and took out those that could be biased towards one culture or another. And so these skills have been shown through the standardization process to be of equal importance to all students, regardless of their racial or ethnic background, and of course can be seen in students from all socioeconomic statuses in all regions of the country. So these are important skills that really have an impact for all. And as we've been growing too, this is also moved to about 13 other countries as well. So we're really learning about that, how culturally appropriate it is as it's been put in practice around the world. So just to look at what is strength-based measurement. So we're talking about identifying strengths for students. We want to make sure that you have an understanding about what are educators looking at when they're really doing this screening and assessment with their classrooms. So this is an example of what we call our DESA mini screener. This is a screener that can be completed by the educator at home, educator in the classroom, and parents at home. In high school, we also engage students to be able to look at their own skills as well. So we're starting to develop that agency of students to look at themselves and be able to set goals around this information as well. There's nothing on here that's scary. There's nothing here that I would say, ooh, I'm not sure that I would want my child doing that. They really are simple, observable behaviors that we would want to see children and students doing anywhere. So both inside the classroom or at home. And of course, it looks a little different when it's at home versus at school. Like contribute to group efforts looks very different in an academic setting. If they were doing maybe group-based project work, or they're working on a task together. Whereas at home, that looks like we have a truck full of dirt that we have to unload, and everybody has to work together to really get this done. And so, you know, this is where that understanding for parents of where their child is with this is so critical, because parents get a chance to see their children in a lot of different activities that just really don't get a chance to occur in school. But if you know that your child does nice things for people all the time, like they love to be a helper, that's their moment where they feel confident in what they're doing, that's a great thing to be able to share with a teacher, and to be able to help them build that relationship too, and give them chances to be successful. So this is that example of that screener. When if a student is identified as having lower skills than they really would need to have for them to be having a positive impact, that's when an educator can reach out to a parent and discuss looking more in depth at additional skills, and where that conversation really starts about, okay, where else can we work together, both in the classroom and at home, and where can we pull out the strengths and dig in as that tribe, and really connecting around the vocabulary and skills. Now, there are a lot of other things that districts will have access to in the system. But really, we're looking at the screener and the assessment, educators, school level administrators, support staff, and district will all be able to look at reports that help them make instructional decisions for students, but also help them look at, as a school, how can we support the needs of our school and what's unique about our school. So schools in a district may look very different. They may be responding different to what's being put in place, but we're still, everybody's on that same understanding of the skills and the competencies that we really need to look at and work together in. And I'm just doing a quick check. So I am going to move quickly through these next couple of things here because I know I'm eating into our breakout discussion right now and I don't want to do too much of that. So again, just focusing on strength-based SEL and how it really does connect to those positive impacts for relationships, both staff relationships, student relationships, and community relationships. And again, looking at connecting this to where parents may have already seen and heard SEL, and that's often around school climate. So there is overlap in what school and where school climate and SEL fall, but you can see here what's different as well, and specifically where those supportive relationships are still front and center. So again, this SEL work highlights that developmentally, these skills are starting through building relationships with families, and it's as they move into school that the context really broadens and those skills mature, but it's those relationships that continue to be that a driving factor to build these skills. This is going to be able to be sent out as a follow-up, so you can just have a little understanding about where it's expected that this SEL data will be put into practice. But what we really want to be able to, for you to start thinking about is, in your role, where would you like this SEL data to be showing up? This work is, as we said, you know, groundbreaking in a lot of ways, and we're being very intentional and partnering with Kim and Betsy and Judy and really thinking about what are the needs, what's the feedback, and what can we start thinking about that is going to need to be in place to really support this work moving forward. So keep thinking about that in your discussions, and I'm sure there'll be lots of areas for it to come back up. Finally, we really do want to connect to that these skills are what employers value. And we want to highlight and reinforce that we're preparing students for lifelong success, that they will be able to be part of the workplace and part of the community and be able to continue to be successful and happy.
We had, I think we can take just a minute for a short Q&A. We did have a question in the chat. How do you ensure that these items aren't viewed solely through a white lens?
So when the items were created, there was about 350 skills specifically that were identified that could be measured. And as I mentioned, the authors had different people look at them from different backgrounds to highlight which ones might not be appropriate. So one of the items that was thrown out, I believe, was makes eye contact when engaging. And for some cultures, that's just not a culturally appropriate thing, and is not something that we could expect all students to be doing. So that is through the development. Now, also through the professional learning, there is that aspect of bias, of course, that we want to further reduce. And really that comes in having educators understand what are they going to be doing with this information, what are they looking for in the classroom when they're watching children and observing. And really they're just looking for how often does a child do this? So it's not, they're not labeling or highlighting deficits as well. So that in itself reduces the bias. Now, I can't speak to specific rater instances, and I'm not sure if Kim or Ashley have anything else to add to that, but I do know that we have taken the steps to look at that bias piece and to provide guidance on how to reduce it even further.
I certainly can just add, because Ashley and I were talking about this or chatting about this as well. And it definitely will be included in the professional learning and technical assistance. But we also know that in the majority of our schools right now are really concentrating on cultural responsiveness, and also looking at their own bias that they bring to the table and recognizing that bias based on quote unquote the white lens, right? So that, I think with that piece, and we're also doing a lot of work, I don't know if anyone is really familiar with Dr. Darren Graves from Simmons University and Harvard University. He actually is from Connecticut originally, but he wrote an incredible book called Schooling for Critical Consciousness, which we have, we're having him as a speaker at the Equity Conference this summer, but also he's been working with Connecticut. We hired him to actually work with us in districts on this matter. And really his work is around how to look at racial equity. So there's a focus on that. So that with that piece, and then what we're doing with rolling out our K-12 habits, we're going to have that piece in addition to what Aperture is providing for professional learning and technical assistance.
And
I'm going to take 1 second just because I think this is really critical information and to why we're here in Friday Cafe. Kim, I don't know that people know what the K-12 habits work is. Can you just briefly say a word? Because I think as this rolls out in classrooms and schools, there's going to be a really important piece, helping families understand and connecting families with that very important work.
Yeah, that's great, Judy. So the social emotional habits were K-3, and they were introduced in 2018. And then we've heard from districts and also from families and across Connecticut, actually, why is it that we don't have 4 through 12? And it's a very good question. Why didn't we have 4 through 12? And so we worked really, really hard this past year to ensure that we had K through 12. So we are almost done with the 4 through 12. They will be completed at the end of June. And really, the habits are really about instructional practices in the classroom. Now, I want to say that SEL is embedded into what teachers and student support services folks do day in and day out, especially, I mean, the school counselors, for example, have their standards around social emotional learning. The interesting thing is, though, is that how do we identify it? How do we see it? And how do we make it equitable? How do we have it as an inclusion practice and also providing access to kids? And that was our biggest goal in designing these indicators, or which we are calling habits, or areas of development. And so there will be, once that has been approved, then there will be some training and professional learning provided to districts on how to implement this well and incorporate it into your, or I should say, integrate it into your lessons and into your instructional practices. So we will be continuing that work, but I think that's really important work because it's really looking at the foundational level, and with the information that you're getting from the DESA as well will help inform that. So it will help us make better decisions around, you know, what can we support with students in the areas where they need more support.
Thank you, Kim, and I just, I really appreciate that. And as that rolls out, I would love to invite you back to Friday Cafe and talk with our community about how parents and teachers are going to be connecting around what those habits look like, what they mean, and the homeschool connection. That's a really powerful place the parents can and must be partners. So thank you.
Absolutely.
That's more to come. Yeah.
Yes, invitation accepted. Thank you.
All right, great. So I know we cut a few minutes into the breakout rooms, but I thought that was a really important piece to add. So Lisa Ann, back to you.
Yes, and actually, speaking about that homeschool connection, and answering one of the questions in the chat. So Aperture does not only provide the SEL assessments, but we also provide resources for educators, support staff, and administrators to support students to be able to engage with parents and families and take-home activities, and for educators to continue to reflect and develop their own SEL skills. And this activity today is focusing on self-management and goal-directed behavior. And we have a set of questions for you to reflect on. And it really is focusing on the personal responsibility and growing leadership skills, and really just thinking about how we can intentionally cultivate that and build that really tailored to learners where they're at and what they need, and really it's very powerful for children when they realize they can use their own strengths to not only help others, but to be better. And so you are actually reflecting on the questions that a student or a child would take home and be doing with their parents at home. So just to be able to continue to grow our own SEL lens.
And on that question number 4, whether, you offer help before you offer advice sort of thing. I think I've finally gotten to a point, and I could say that for myself, where like when I look at something, when I listen to something, I just truly listen. I don't have to fix you. I don't have to. You just listen. And if you become a good listener, it allows you to just be there. Sometimes people don't need you to say anything, or they just want to know what you do so that you could, so they don't feel like they're alone in the world. I think we all need that sometimes, right?
What a great insight. Taking me, I think, probably 30 years to get to that one, right? We're trained to kind of do rather than step back and listen, right?
Yeah.
Very important. Anyone else?
I just want to add that there's an interesting observation in our group that we struggle with the first question, because when when women are asked about how successful they are to announce successes, we struggle with that. And so we sort of hesitated in responding to the question. And I think that that's sort of interesting when we don't just like say, you know what, yeah, I did do this and I did a pretty darn good job at it, and I should be able to like talk about it. So I want to just say to all of you, let's talk about our successes. We're great women.
Thanks, Kim. That's huge, right? And I guess it goes to, a lot of times we talk about strength-based, and a lot of times we're talking to families. And so if it was hard for us to kind of identify, it's the same thing when we're talking to families about that, about that piece. It just, we're not used to it. We're just not used to it. So yeah, share them, put them up there. Anyone else?
We're here and we're educators, but when we often reflect on our success, we do think about our parents' side of life and our children being successful and making those transitions and things like that. And so just always just remembering that the two sides, it's so much of who we are, and we just sometimes just changing that perspective and anchoring back to connecting with others who are experiencing the same thing.
So important. I'm just going to say that I loved that activity, because right now we're talking about, we're talking about young people, our students in our schools, and, we're talking about families, but, there's a whole other discussion around the adults working in the schools, right? And that self-care that is going to be, just incredibly important as we go back in September. And so maybe it is that we just really and truly just need to also take some care of ourselves. That came up in our conversations in our group, and that we're not really good at taking, I have to speak for myself. I'm not really good at taking that self-care a lot of the times. I'm the oldest woman in an Irish family. I have to take care of everybody in my family. So time to take some self-care.
Yeah, and I would like to reiterate that because, of course, with SEL, we are not just talking about students. We are talking about our, teachers, leaders, all staff, all family members. SEL is all. And it is so important that we really take the time for ourselves. I know I'm really bad at it. And I know Betsy was just talking about me, sort of, because I actually, don't take the time to understand the balance between work and home. And so I think in our districts, when we get back in the fall, that's something that we do have to think about, is how, take a pulse on how our staff is doing in schools and how our families are doing in their communities. I think it's really, really important. And that should be a priority.
I'm writing it down, Kim, as one of our Friday cafes, right? Self-care. We've often talked about, using the oxygen mask to take care of each other. And so I think this would be a great topic for next year. Thank you, Kim, for bringing Ashley and Lisa Ann to Connecticut and building on the work that's happening in Connecticut. This is a great conversation. I think at this point, so today is our last Friday Cafe for this year. And what we want to do is I just want to, again, thank our Friday Cafe loyalists, our tribe, for continuing to support us. And hopefully we've supported you throughout the year. So we'll be up and at it again in October. You can talk to either Judy or I. We are always looking for advisory members to help us plan for next year as far as these topics. We love this. We love to do this, and topics are really important, and that goes without saying. Hopefully by the end of maybe the middle of next year, we'll be in person in our innovative spaces as we do this. We love that too. Again, I just wanted to thank you all for being here. And I know that, Kim, there'll be more information as schools are beginning to sign on and do different things, Kim, so that resource will be available.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll have a lot more resources coming up for sure. And also, we're almost done with the Q&A that Lisa and Ashley had designed for families in regards to the DESA. So stay tuned for that.
I hope you have a safe summer and a great re-entry as we kind of go back. It's challenging, but we're going to go with a strength-based, right, and the positive, that there's real opportunities. We know this. So again, thank you so much. Bye-bye.